In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to build the best gaming PC you can assemble for a budget that's as close to $1,000 as possible. With PC part pricing still kind of crazy, especially for things like GPUs and most recently PC cases, building a great value system that provides amazing performance at a reasonable price can be quite tricky. This system is going to be all about great 1080p and 1440p gaming across a range of not only popular esports titles but AAA games too, and it's a system that should be both upgradable and fairly easy to put together. I'll be walking you guys through all the parts in the build, how to assemble it, and looking at the gaming benchmarks later, testing everything from Indiana Jones and Cyberpunk to Call of Duty, Apex Legends, and Fortnite on this very build a little bit later. So without any further ado, let's dive into it. Now, I'm going to start today's build off by talking about the CPU and the GPU. Why? Because although it's kind of predictable here on the GeekaWhat channel, they're just the two most important parts, and that is never going to change. For the graphics card, we've got a few options. I've gone for the RX 9060 XT 16GB, and here's why I believe it to be the best choice by really quite a long way. Now, on the Intel side, the B580 would be the closest competition, and on the NVIDIA side, the RTX 5060 or 5060 Ti would be the nearest match. Now, the 9060 XT sits somewhere in the middle in terms of price, but typically has the best performance of any of the cards I've just mentioned. The only GPU that's going to beat it out in some occasions is the 16GB 5060 Ti, but for around $100 more, that's not great value for money. Because this is a build aimed for 1080p and a bit of 1440p gaming, I'm also completely ruling out any of the 8GB GPUs, including the 8GB variant of the 9060 XT. You see, AMD have been just a little bit naughty and actually have what is in effect two different graphics cards with the same name. So make sure if you buy a 9060 XT, you get the 16GB variant. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about VRAM, but I'll just show you on screen now the difference in VRAM usage in a game like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And this is at 1440p. You can see here it's using a much greater allocation of that video memory. So for the sake of an extra $40, $50 in real terms, this is absolutely the card you want, especially if you want a little bit of future-proofing in there too. VRAM aside, the 9060 XT is a really capable GPU. I think it might be my second favorite release in the 9000 series so far, behind only the 9070 XT, which generally was received as one of the best cards in years. Gives you great rasterization performance, that's with no ray tracing, no upscaling turned on, but FSR is getting better, it's getting closer to DLSS, and if you look at ray tracing side by side on AMD and NVIDIA, there is still a gap. NVIDIA is still better, but that gap is closing. Now, in terms of the CPU I'm pairing it up with, I've gone for this, the AMD Ryzen 5 9600X. Now, I looked at some of the latest pricing and availability, and if you're in the US, the 9600X makes sense. You can find it for a shave over $200 on Newegg at the time of filming. So alongside the GPU, we're looking at about $500 to $550, or half of the budget, which is perfect. Here in the UK, it's a slightly different story, as we actually have the 9600 Non-X available and the last gen 7000 series chips, which have fallen in price a lot. The Ryzen 7600 Non-X would be fine for this build, but as I say, depending on the pricing in your region, you might find this to be the same price, cheaper, or even only a little more expensive, and for that we're going to get slightly better performance. It's got 6 cores, 12 threads, and good clock speeds, which ticks all the boxes. If anyone's wondering about Intel, it's a bit awkward, isn't it? Intel's just not worth your time right now. Doesn't represent good value for money, especially in a really budget build like this. And while there are some sweet spots like the Core Ultra 7, which is actually like under $300 now, for a system like this, we just don't need that kind of power. In terms of the RAM and SSD, these are two really easy components to tick off. This is the T-Force VULCAN DDR5 from Team Group, is I think currently the cheapest, reputable, well-rated kit of 32GB RAM on Newegg. This particular kit is 6,000 with a C out of 30, and even comes apparently with a lifetime warranty. So if you buy this RAM and you try and make a claim in 10 years, let me know. The SSD I've gone for is this, the Crucial P3 Plus. Now this is the 2TB drive, but if you want to stick as close to $1,000 as possible, you're going to need to account for the 1TB option instead. It's a Gen 4 drive that's plenty fast enough, isn't too thermally hot, is cheap and easy to buy in pretty much every single region, and provides really reliable performance. There is one optional part in this build that you don't necessarily need to pick up. Now this is the Thermalright Assassin X 120 refined SE, and it's a tower air cooler. You'll see in a lot of my builds, I don't like using the stock cooler. Now, the 9600X CPU that I'm primarily recommending doesn't come with a cooler, but if you go for the last gen 7600 or the new 9600 non-X, that will come with a stock cooler. And to be honest with you, the stock cooler is probably fine. I just don't like the noise that these stock coolers make. And when you can find this Thermalright unit for around $20 to $25, that makes way more sense. Now, let's talk about power supply before we do the motherboard. Let's show it some love. Again, I'm motivated by cost here. The 9060 XT is an incredibly power efficient GPU, and you don't need anything fancy. This is going to be absolutely fine. The A650BN from MSI. It's a fairly reputable unit with good reviews, a competitive price point, and it helps us to meet that budget in this build. If you wanted to swap out any part in this system for more performance, you could swap out the GPU, go up to a 9070 non-XT, but you'd need to switch out the power supply. I'd recommend another 100 watts if you're going to go higher end on the graphics card. In terms of the motherboard, I'm going to be really boring. I've lost count of how many times I've used this, the B850 Eagle Wi-Fi 6E. But if we're anything here on the channel, it's honest. And I'm not going to change this board out for another design. Why? Because this is the best option. Like, hands down, I haven't found a better B850 board that's standard ATX form factor, that has things like Wi-Fi built in for a more competitive price. MSI's boards seem to be more expensive. ASRock are really the only people who challenge on pricing, but you tend to lose out on features. I don't think the BIOS is as good, and a lot of their boards don't have Wi-Fi as standard. I actually stole this motherboard from GeekaPC, which is our UK pre-building company, where we use these boards in so many builds. I have a lot of experience with them, and for that reason, I think it's the best choice. Final thing, I think the last component, yes, to talk about is the case, and I have gone for this. This is the Montech XR, and to be honest with you, it's one of many dual glass-fronted PC cases with reverse intake fans. And you'll see what I mean if I go ahead and open it up. And what I'm saying about this case being fairly generic is not necessarily a bad thing. The build quality feels pretty good. You've got this nice clear tempered glass side panel on the side, which I actually can't get off because of the tape. There we go. I'm going to remove that, and you can also very easily remove, I think, this front panel too. Too much tape in this case. There we go. That tape is actually just to stop the panel from coming off in shipping, to be fair. You get good support really in this case for airflow too. You can actually mount a good number of fans up to 320 mils at the top here. You've got two reverse blade 120s in intake included, and a single 120 mil unit at the back as well. The only thing you have to be careful of with this case is the position of these fans. If you've got a really long graphics card, sometimes these can create a bit of a clearance issue. On most cards it's fine, the tolerances are just tight. Now in our instance, as you can see from the small size of the box, the card, once this out, is nowhere near the kind of size that's going to cause us significant problems, but it's something to be aware of. I'll always take the back panel off the case as well. You need this to access obviously all your cables and stuff, but the main reason I'm doing it now is because inside you should be able to locate a bag. Now this bag includes, if I can get it out, all of the different screws and accessories that you need. It looks like we get a cleaning cloth in here too for the side panel, some Velcro, as well as plastic cable ties, and of course things like your motherboard standoffs and screws for good measure. First things first, I'm going to install the CPU. On the CPU, you're going to find a golden triangle. Now this triangle is really, really important for the installation of the processor. The reason being because we need to line this triangle up with the plastic triangle on the top left corner of the CPU socket. Now you can see here from the CPU where our triangle is, just in this corner up here. And as I say, we're going to make sure to match these up. What you need to do is push down the retention arm, then push it outwards, and that is going to release the CPU socket. You can see it just unfolds nice and easily. The black plastic cover is going to stay on for now, so don't worry too much about that. And then the CPU is going to drop in. You can see here we need to get it in perfectly, and you can give it a little bit of a push either side just to make sure it's seated correctly. Then add the socket cover back down, return the arm into place, and the black plastic protector will pop off. Keep this safe in case you ever sell or need to return the motherboard for any reason. I'm then going to move on to the RAM or memory. I do like an RGB kit of memory, and for an extra like $10 or $15, you could get something with some lighting included. But we're working to a budget today, and I said to myself, I've got to be strict. I've got to make something that is really, really focused on value. You can see I've pushed back the clips on the second and fourth slots, counting outwards from the CPU, and I'm just going to slide the RAM into place. You can see here the T-Force logo on the front is facing away from the processor. That's going to ensure the memory is lined up if you're using the same motherboard and RAM as me. and with a bit of pressure, they're going to go in. You can just try and pull these out on either side, not too firm, but just to make sure that they're successfully latched. I'm then going to finish things off with the M.2 SSD. That's just here. Just simply remove the little notch there to lift up the M.2 heatsink. Make sure to take off this little blue thermal pad piece as well, especially if you want to make sure your SSD has the advantage of this sort of metal extruded heatsink. Before sliding the SSD into place, you can see the little gold contact strips are going to go into the slot, the drive's going to push down, and then the cover is going to pop on. It really, really is that simple. The final thing to do on the motherboard assembly is the CPU cooler. So I'm going to guide you through Thermalright's Assassin X redefined next up. And this is pretty easy. All you need to do is just remove these black plastic brackets that are going to come pre-installed on the motherboard, and then add these red little stoppers over the case's built-in standoffs. A little something like that. Easy. We're then going to add these little brackets on. They're going to go just here to the left and the right hand side of the CPU, with the screw threads pointing out away from the CPU. A small dab of thermal paste later, around the size of a large grain of rice, and then, in theory, the CPU tower itself should actually pop on. Yeah, see, look at that, absolute piece of cake. Now, these are thumb screws, but I highly suggest you hand tighten them with a screwdriver as well, just to make sure they're nice and taut, and that you've got good contact between the top of the CPU and the bottom plate on the cooler. That's, of course, going to be dealing with all of the heat transfer. The included fan is going to go onto the cooler later, so don't worry about doing this just yet. Once the motherboard assembly is complete, I'm then going to move this into the case. Now, because this is an ATX board and an ATX case, all the standoffs are in the right place. You can see this if I just show you the motherboard, with 3 screw holes along the bottom, 3 along the middle, and a further 3 at the top, and they match up with the corresponding standoffs now inside of the case. The board's then going to slide in. The built-in I/O shield's going to make life easy on that front as well. Just make sure you don't get stuck behind any fan cables, and once you're lined up, the board is going to be nice and easy to screw in. 9 screws here. I might screw the board in upright. It's a little bit more tricky. You could lay the case down flat, and the screws you need for this, as mentioned earlier, come included in that case accessory bag from just a few minutes ago. Okay, so next up, I can go ahead and pop the fan on. So why don't we go and do that now? There we go. That's pretty easy to do. Should just be a case. Hang on. I've put the silver things on the wrong end. You put the silver things on the very back of the fan. Always get that bit wrong, and then that should go on. Yeah, look at that. The fan spills just over the edge of the heatsink, but it's fine because it still sits below at the end of the heat pipes. Now then, with that done, I think the power supply, the cabling, and the wiring is up next, and I will today be running you guys through a full guide on what on earth to do when it comes to cables and wiring. Now let's start off with some basic info about power supplies. There's 3 kind of power supplies. You've got a non-modular design, which is what this is. So you've got all your cables plugged in, no ability to plug in anymore, and it can be harder to cable manage. You've then got semi-modular power supplies, which will typically have your CPU, GPU, and motherboard cable pre-ran in, and then the rest be optional. And then you have fully modular power supplies, where you literally only plug in the cables you need. Now for this build today, and for lower wattages, non-modular is fine. Why? Because if I talk you through the cables, we've got the motherboard power cable here, which we're going to need. We've got our GPU power cable, comprised of 2 6+2 pin connections, which we're going to need. We've got a CPU power. This is a 4+4 pin. We're going to need that too. And then we've got some Molex and SATA power cables. I'm not sure we'll need these, but they're not exactly hard to manage and keep out of the way, and we can just tuck them under the case. You'll also find at the back of the case some front panel cables, and for me today, they're just tucked under here at the bottom. Now you can see they come pre-managed and neatly organized, and there's just a few here to point out. You've got 2 which look very similar. The one that's multicolored is your audio connector. The black one is for your front panel, and then these 2 are your USBs. So this is the USB 3 Type A. This one here is the USB 3 Type C. These are going to control the power button and reset button on the front panel, the HD audio, the headphone mic jack, and then your USBs. Pretty self-explanatory. They connect directly to the USB ports as well. So what I'm going to do is slide the power supply in, then go ahead and plug up the power cables. So the CPU one up to the top left, motherboard to the right hand side, and then the front panel cables. So your JFP one or your front panel to the bottom right, HD audio to the bottom left, and then the 2 USB 3 cables. They're really simple. They only go in the places that they fit. It really is that easy. So don't force it and just take your time with this step, really. And the final thing then is the graphics card. Now, I talked about this 9060 XT earlier. It's perhaps a little bigger than I thought it was, because this is actually a 3-fan design. Okay, it's a very small 3-fan design. I mean, look how diddy that is. We'll put some shots on your screen now comparing it to like a, I don't know, a 5070 Ti 3 fan. It's pretty small. And as we can see, if we slide it into the case, yeah, it doesn't even meet the fans. You can probably see what I mean there about the clearance. And if you've got a longer card, these fans can get a little bit touch and go. So that's just something to be aware of if you're going to build this system for yourself. Just watch out for the size of card. 9060 XT, you don't need anything massive. And as I say, this build works perfectly fine with larger GPUs. It just can be a little bit tight on tolerance. That's not to say it won't work. It's just to say you might want to be careful. A couple of things I like about this case, it's really cheap, but you still get proper PCI lanes with screws, not the horrible snap out type that I think Cooler Master had some snap out PCI lanes on one of their recent cases. Totally inexcusable in 2025, it really is. Now on this GIGABYTE board, we do have a little button to release the PCI latch, which is nice. I do think that's a good way of doing it. Slide the card in, and that's that. Now by the looks of things, the clip has actually auto-engaged and the button is up, so we don't even have to do anything. You just have to push that down to take the card out. I'm then going to go ahead and just secure it back in with the 2 screws that we used to remove the PCI lanes. That is nice and easy. Add this little cover back on through the thumb screw. Simple. And then just a wire for the GPU. Specifically, not any wire, it's a 6+2 pin PCI wire. So that is going to go through the bottom grommet. You could chuck it through that one, but to be honest, it's a little bit far away. And then it plugs in to the graphics card nice and easily. Look at that. There are a couple of bits and pieces I do want to do quickly. I'm going to say a couple. What I really mean is one. We've got here this RGB cable, which is nicely pre-wired up. And you can see on the end here, we've got this female connector. That needs to go into the motherboard, and the same for this fan cable tucked away. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and plug those up to the motherboard. If we have some spare ports, I think we do. And in theory, once they're done, the PC should power on. So let's plug her in, set the power supply switch to 1, and see whether or not I've got this right. Yes, so we have fans spinning. The GPU's lit up already, and you can slide this little cover over, which is pretty cool. There's no RGB though right now. Oh, there it is. I don't think I fixed that. I think it just took a minute to load in. Next step is to get this thing connected to a monitor and check out some gaming performance numbers. Okay, so the system looks good, especially for the price. But what about performance? On your screen now is a summary of the results that we gathered across a mix of 1080p and 1440p resolutions. Taking a closer look at some of these titles yields some really good results. Apex Legends, for example, at 1440p high settings, pulled in over 200 FPS on average, 232.5 to be precise. Call of Duty's Black Ops 6, we did drop down to 1080p here in the zombies mode to ensure a good frame rate, but still achieved over 155 frames per second. While finally in Doom the Dark Ages, a really difficult, intensive AAA title at 1080p high, this system pulled in a really strong 79.9 FPS on average. You can find links to all the parts used in today's build in the description down below. Thanks for watching, get subscribed if you aren't already, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.